A humble match was the technological breakthrough of its day in the 1800s. The match allowed people to create light and heat in their own home, just from this little stick. In the 1800s, this match factory was the workplace of over 2,000 women and teenage girls. There was a lot of money to be made from the matchmaking industry. People owning the factories were getting quite rich. In contrast to that, the match workers themselves were working in appalling conditions, often for very little pay. Given these conditions, it was no surprise that many people suffered from ill health, but people began to suspect that there may be other reasons why they were suffering. Matches at the time were made with a substance called white phosphorus, and it became clear that this was the substance that was leading to a whole raft of health problems for the match workers. One of the most dangerous things was called phossy jaw, which was like a kind of deadly cancer. In 1888, the women of the match factory went on strike in protest against their lack of pay and working conditions. This became known as the Match Girl Strike of 1888. The strike lasted for 3 weeks. As a result, the conditions in the factory were slightly improved, but the white phosphorus continued to do its deadly work. In 1891, in East London, the Salvation Army opened up its very own match factory. It was clean, light and airy, and the girls who worked there had tea breaks. They also got paid a fair wage, a third more than other factories, and most importantly, the matches were made using the safe and less toxic red phosphorus. William Booth used the factory as a showcase for social reform. The Salvation Army owned and ran the match factory for 10 years. The campaign was successful, and other factories followed suit, stating they would no longer be using white phosphorus in their matches. The Match Girls strike and the Salvation Army's example at the time ultimately improved the working conditions for many thousands of workers. The matches themselves have lived up to the bold claims on the box. They were far more than mere matches. They really were lights in darkest England.
Good morning. It's nice to see you all. Well, this is a first, isn't it, Raywin, for us?
As an interview, yes.
Is this going?
Yes.
Good. 47 and a half years, or 47 and a bit years ago, we first met at the training college in Wellington, at number 33 Arrow Street, and we shared the White House together up on the hill, our two families. And so that's where we commenced our training, and we had a few issues along the way, and a few things happened. We had a house fire, and we won't say who caused that, but it was someone in our family. What else did we have, Raywin? We had lots of things together, but we did a lot of sharing. And at night time, we used to share their lounge, because they had a proper lounge, and they had a gas fire in their lounge. And so after study time, usually late at night, we would gather around the gas fire and we would share hot chips together.
After hours, I might add.
Yes, after hours. And you know what? We still share hot chips together through the week. Usually on Wednesday lunch.
Earlier in the day now.
Earlier in the day, not late at night. And so now, after 47 years, having lived in lots of different places around the world, and we are now retired, we find ourselves living on the same street, sharing life once again in Rotorua. And this morning, I have some questions that I've been asked to ask you, and I'm sure you're going to answer them well for us this morning. And as we reflect on the early days of your life there in Timaru, my first question to you this morning is, what are some of the encouraging memories of your early beginnings of faith and ministry in Timaru, where your life began?
Well, key components for me. I was taught right from wrong. Yes, no, wait, and the consequences of any of those responses. My parents lived by and taught those to myself and two sisters from a very early age. Although no vehicle in our family for many years, we were all encouraged to attend Salvation Army activities at the Salvation Army Corps in Timaru, and this meant on our bikes, doubled by Dad until such time as we could ride our own bikes. Discipline. Yes, one on the back and one on the front at times. Leaders of the activities that I attended were all instrumental in teaching and guiding my early life's journey, and that set a very structured path ahead. Did I always submit to this wise counsel? No. The Corps Cadet program that we had, Corps Cadets in the day, was an advanced Bible study. It included quarterly exams, and we were expected to memorise Bible verses, Bible passages, and taught an understanding of Scripture. And over those early years, this has prepared me and encouraged me to learn more. Many of those verses have been given so much support and security and encouragement, and they still do today. I think God is love would be the first verse that I recall memorising as a child. But other than that, the first would be, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. I strayed, and I returned. And I strayed, and I returned. But that particular verse was a constant for me up until this very day. And another verse of God's promise of help and protection and strength, abide in me, and I will abide in you.
And so you had lots of people influencing your life along the way in those early days. You had leaders and people that instructed and people that encouraged you. Does that be right?
That'd be right.
That's right. Good.
Tried their best.
You tried their best. Well, I think they did quite well, don't you? Yeah. So thanks for reminding us today the importance of people teaching and leading the way and giving guidance in early years. You know, nothing changes. We still need people today to give that guidance, that support for our young people in their Christian walk. And we are grateful for those here in this Corps that do just that, who guide and support our young people in so many different ways. But I'm going to give a little bit of a plug here. There's always room for more to get on the team. So if you're having that little bit of divine niggle this morning about getting on the team, then go and talk to the leaders, because I'm sure they would love to hear from you. Now, moving on in your ministry, Raywin, to officership. What are some of the best memories and what are some of the challenges from those days?
How much time have we got?
Not a lot.
Best memories. One must be the friendships made, right? One of 28 cadets, and fair to say, right up until today, those friendships made have remained, and I am extremely grateful for those. I think that our time administering with youth in the youth department, divisional youth officers we were called in the day, has to be up there amongst my best memories. youth councils, Easter camps. We used to run, the Salvation Army would run our own Easter camps back then. So we were running Easter camps, music camps, junior soldier weekends, and watching during these times young people having wonderful fellowship together, tempered, of course, with a load of mischief. But above all, surrounding and surrendering their lives to the Lord. Challenging times. Well, firstly, there's an old chorus. It wouldn't be me if I didn't bring in some old choruses. Some here may recall. I'd like to read, I think I've got the words right. God is the God of the good times and the bad. The God who is God of the mountain is the God of the valley. God of the day is still God of the night. Yes, there have been a couple of challenges along the way. Possibly high on the list would be the expectations on both myself as an officer, but more so on our family. Number 2, not being available to attend significant occasions in our wider family. Lindsay and I were placed in our individual families in a position where once we'd left home, there were many marriages and engagements and significant birthdays and then baby arrivals, etc. And we were unable to attend one of those. So that was always a challenge for me. And number 3 were the moves in 3 years. Took a bit of getting our heads around. 3 moves in 3 years. I say our heads because we lived and viewed this calling as one on our family. And at the time we had these 3 moves in 3 years, our family had spent at least 10 years, it may have even been 12 years, in Wellington. So we had been fortunate in that we had spent all this time in Wellington, where my 3 children grew up and spent their time with the Wellington South congregation and went to the same school. So they had built lots of friendships over those years. And then all of a sudden, upheaval. Shane had started his first job. I think he had been working about 12 months. Anthony had just begun his apprenticeship, and Rochelle had just finished her 5th form year at school, going into 6th. And so it meant big changes for all of us at that stage. And the outcome meant leaving the 2 boys behind and Rochelle coming with us to a brand new set of school friends. There was nobody. At the Wellington school, she had core friends, friends that she had made, girlfriends at the Salvation Army, and they were at school with her as well. So there were a fine bunch of young people that she had grown up with, but she had no friends at the core and no friends at the school. And at the age of 15, 16, that was a big ask. However, we got there, and 12 months into it, we get farewell orders again, and we go to Auckland. So down to Auckland, we pack our bags back to Auckland, and then 12 months after that, pick up and move back to Wellington. So yeah, that was a challenging time, but God was in it. He was with us all the way through that, and that's how we got through, I'm sure.
So through all of those times, God has been faithful. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases.
Indeed.
And he never leaves or forsakes us, the good times and the not so good times. If there is someone here today who has been called into ministry or to officership, Raewyn, what would you say to them?
Well, firstly, I feel that there's no if. In a congregation this size and the variety of ages in this congregation, there's no doubt in my mind that the Lord is calling. People are being called in this congregation this morning. Funny, I asked this question of my family. If called to officership, what would the answer be? And the first one came back, run. With tongue-in-cheek, of course. But that is exactly what I did. Sometimes at a trot, sometimes at great pace, for approximately 15 years. Yes, I had signed covenants, commitments for many activities within the Salvation Army, junior soldiers and soldierships, senior soldiership, songsters, young people's work and leadership, and women's ministries. But for me, this was a means of running from what the Lord really was asking of me. Lord, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. What more can there possibly be expecting of me? So for me, it was a means of running. There was a sense of selfishness, lifestyle changes, home, family, to which I had become very accustomed. Me, the queen of excuses. So it was marriage, work, family business, continued in the core activities. Along came son number 1, wrote off a car, built a new home, watched it burn down. Son number 2 along by now, built that house back up again right in the same spot. And along came number 3 to our family. And in that mix, we had a cadets campaign where in the day, cadets from the Salvation Army Training College were sent different corps around New Zealand to spend, I think it was a week at the time, and we were asked to billet some of those cadets that came to the Timaru Corps. And of course we said, yes, we do. We would billet the cadets, and along came none other than cadets Gary and Sandra Malsop into our midst. Wasn't a good idea. What a mix. So the question number 4, to get back, to those here this morning who are tuned into the Lord's call on your life, speak to somebody about it. It's a means of accountability. Get involved in aspects of the core. All the years I did spend in activities in the Corps were very helpful to me as an officer. To those who are maybe sitting making excuses this morning, just as I did, there is no feeling like the feeling of release. And that's another word that came from one of my family members when asked. The joy that comes and the release that comes from saying yes to the Lord, doing the will of God. The best thing I know in this world below has to be doing the will of God. I believe God has a different plan for all of us here this morning. We just need to tune into Him and listen to Him and obey.
So covenants are important. And in summing up, it seems to me that having a covenant with God is pretty important for each one of us. For some, that would be worked out in our local corps or church ministry. There are many opportunities of ministry available in this place. Again, another plug. Children's work, youth work, women's ministries, music opportunities, and many more. Talk to our leaders if you are feeling that divine niggle to be involved. Now, Raywin, you didn't know I was going to say this, but I'm going to. You have been given many gifts, and you have used them faithfully. And as it says in Proverbs, you have hung around your neck love and faithfulness through the years. And I want to thank the Lord for you today. And I want to thank you for your friendship over all these years. And you know what? It's not over yet. It still grows. And as we share Sally Alley at Rotatuna. We are going to have a good time. There's still good times to come.
You know, it's fascinating that this weekend Salvation Army is celebrating 160 years in the worldwide Salvation Army. And this is Founders Weekend, Covenant Sunday. But it's also a special celebration for this lady. And before I sit down in a moment and interview Lieutenant Colonel Moira Tong, on the 4th of July, 1954, you were enrolled as a senior soldier of Hamilton City Salvation Army. By my calculation, that makes 71 years. And while the Salvation Army has been around the world for 160 years, we've been in New Zealand for over 140, and Moira, you've been there for half of it. No, that's really significant. And Hamilton City Salvation Army has had a long history, I believe, of being blessed with young people. I can remember arriving in 1957 and being absolutely awed by the young adults in the Corps. There was Moira and Valerie, and there was Beryl Kerr, there was Jean and Margaret, there were the boys, there were Kevin and Brian and Gordon who brought me along, and there was all these young adults involved in Hamilton Corps, and often on Sunday you get taken out for lunch. Elsie Limmer's dinners, man, they were something else to die for. And so no wonder we got involved. But tell us about these young adult years in Hamilton City Corps.
Well, I suppose I didn't come into the Corps until I was 11 and a half, basically. Mum was a Salvationist. Well, Mum was brought up in the army, but my dad was a Methodist lay minister. And we went to the Methodist church that was over from where we lived, over the gully. But Dad always made sure that we knew about the Salvation Army. So I suppose my first memories of the Salvation Army were the bands marching down the street. Yeah. And I apparently told my parents I was going to be one of them ladies in them funny hats.
Right.
So that came true.
Yeah.
That must have been a God-given moment, I think, because it came true.
Yeah.
Then when we came to the army, we were welcomed. The Smith girls, I think, had the biggest influence on us. That's the Eric Smith children. We had everything that you could think of in the Salvation Army in those days. The Salvation Army was where we lived, our second home. Yeah. And we had to walk from Casey's Avenue, which is over the other side of the river, to Bryce Street. And we were there every Sunday. One that I really hooked into for some reason or another was knee drill. At 7:30 in the morning. Always loved that one. Yeah. Is there anything else that I can tell you about that time?
Sounds great.
I joined in everything.
You were, and my recollection is there was directory, there was Young People's Corps, there was Corps Cadets, there was junior soldiers, there was Sunday night sing-arounds of pianos in someone's home.
That was awesome.
After the Sunday night meeting. It was a vibrant time for young people, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So into this came your call to officership. And the Salvation Army talks about the fact that every young person should look at how they can serve God. But how do you remember that call coming?
I guess my first encounter, real encounter, Dad was a loving father, so he and Mum taught us about the Lord. But my real encounter with the Lord was coming to a service. We had the Griffiths here for an evangelist time, and I lined up. Mum said, oh, this was after Dad had died, Mum said, we better go because they were billeted with us. We better go and at least hear them once. So I was armed with my nuts and raisins wrapped up in my hanky, and I was nibbling on them in the back seat, as far away as I possibly could. And I have no idea what was said. I remember we were singing, but that meant nothing to me. But all of a sudden, I was at the mercy seat. And I think it was Mrs. Major Lindsay, Lee, that actually spoke to me and quoted, God so loved the world, that he gave his life for me. So that was my first encounter. Then I went with my girlfriend at the time, Muriel Green, to a Narrawahia Christian camp. And it was there that I was introduced to being a missionary. The Bible said people do things as they see, not following God's word, but as they see is right. And I think I was heading in that direction, and I hadn't got that quite right. Then at youth councils, which we loved, youth councils was quite a time. And most of the folks that were from Hamilton City would remember how all our Hamilton young people, we were in the Northern Division in those days, and we would sit at the back and make sure that Auntie Alice wasn't going around fishing, and we would all be down.
Let me help me understand. We would go to youth councils, and at an appropriate time in the appeal, dear Auntie Alice and others would move around the rows, and they would tap you on the shoulder and say, Wilfred, don't you think you should go forward? Yes, right.
So you had her too, did you?
Oh, yes.
Auntie Alice, she loved the Lord so much. She wanted us all to love him and all to follow him. And in those days, following him was officership. And so, yes, we all got tapped on this. And I'm not keeping to my notes, but that doesn't matter, does it?
Not at all. So as young people, we have hopes and aspirations. And Moira, you had trained and you were a really qualified tailoress under Bruce Adams, and he made many uniforms here in the Corps. But there came into your life a particular calling. Tell me about that.
My calling to officership?
Your calling to overseas service.
Oh, yeah, well, that came from Isaiah. God spoke to me, has spoken to me verbally, but has used his word a hang of a lot. And Isaiah 6, is it? I'm a bit flabbergasted at the moment.
You're okay. You're doing
In
well.
Isaiah, at any rate, we read that Isaiah was called to, he heard the Lord calling him to obey him. I'm lost. Isaiah didn't say that, but Moira said it.
Who will
Who will go for me?
Who will go for me?
That's right. And I've got it written down here, but it's in small writing and I can't read it.
So through that call, Moira, the germ was planted in your heart about Africa.
Absolutely. The other thing that happened as we, when Hamilton City days, when you went into officership, you left on the train
Yep,
from the station,
yes,
and the whole corps was there to say goodbye.
yep,
And I received a promise. And on that promise, I do remember the promise a little bit, but I remember there was also some other words. It was called the call. The promise came from Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, right?
Yep.
Basically.
yep,
And the call was, He chose this path for thee, no feeble chance or hard, relentless fate, but love. His love has placed thy footsteps here. He knew the path was rough and desolate. He there how the heart would often shake with fear, yet tenderly he whispers, Child, I see this path is best for thee. And I took that with me into my officership. Got to college in 1958
yep,
and met up with this guy who, he was handsome. He was very sad because he'd come to Hamilton City Corps and I hadn't even known him. I wasn't sad. But met up with Alan and we formed a friendship. And in that friendship, he said, I've been called to Africa, I believe. And I said, well, so have I.
yeah.
And he said, and I had a promise before I left, and it's exactly the same one that I got. So the Lord was in that.
Yeah.
And so in due time, we weren't allowed to go when we wanted to go because we had a baby. And Commissioner Gilead said it wasn't properly right for that time. But a year later, headquarters sent a telegram in those days saying send Lieutenant, or Captain he was by then, Captain Tong out to Rhodesia immediately, fly him out. And Commissioner Gilead said, we're not just flying him out, we're going to fly the couple out, the three of them out. And so that was our first flight, my first flight. It was scary.
Yeah.
I looked out a window and the flames I thought were coming out of the plane, so I thought we were going on fire. And Alan was naughty.
Yes.
He teased me and he said, oh, what will we do about it? And in reality, we weren't going to. But however, it took us 5 days to get to Africa flying.
So, Salvation Army has always talked about equality of men and women in ministry. And it seemed in the early days that was equality between married men and single women. And often married women found immense challenges because the Army's view was if you're a married woman, your ministry was to raise the family. You arrive in Africa, you've had the call to Africa, this was what you felt God wanted you to do. Tell us about the experience when you got there.
It was very hard for me. God had called me and nobody gave me a job. So what was I going to do? Eventually, I suppose I'd been there about 6 weeks, and one of the officers said, would you like to come and help me with the Home League up on the hill? And so off I went, learning 2 words, Misimbi Musankwa, girl, boy. going to ask was their child a girl or a boy, so we could show them what clothes we could make for them. But on the way up, I was pushing, we had to walk, of course, everywhere. I was pushing the pushchair, and I think I got quite angry with the Lord. You called me to be an officer, and you said I was to come to Africa, and you got me nothing to do. And the Lord said to me, you've got a mission with your children. Bring them up as I would have them be brought up. And then we can work from there. And so that was my start. And so I worked around that. I didn't stay stuck with that. The other thing that was a challenge to me in those days was teaching Peter. I was not going to send him to boarding school. That to me seemed very unfair on a little child. They used to go to boarding school at 5 and had no family life until they came home every now and again. So teaching Peter was an idea, but I didn't realise that what we would call today, he was dyslexic. So it was a challenge. He learned maths. Maths he could fly through, which was not my best subject. Reading particularly was a challenge to him. And I couldn't understand that because it hadn't been a challenge to me. It wasn't a challenge to Alan. So, yeah, there were challenges like that, but we learnt all other ways to...
But you shared with me, out of those challenges came some amazing, almost unexpected, that many of the home leagues that you started became core.
That was more of Fiji.
That was Fiji?
Yeah.
So let's finish with Africa.
Yeah.
You come back to New Zealand, and now you're asked to go to Fiji.
Yeah.
Tell us about Fiji.
Made my first mistake thinking they were Africans. And speaking to them in Chitonga, which was the language of where we had been. And they didn't understand me. Fiji was an open place for me. We took Stuart and Raywin because they were still at home. And because of that, I was able to start women's groups. And I was thrilled to hear that Nasuri, which had been a women's group, learning to sew and crochet and learning the Bible, things that we would do in Home League, but slightly differently, had become a core. And many places like that we managed to do those kind of things. But I loved it there. And the other thing was that I used to do there, Cynthia had managed to get into the prison work and just be with ladies. So I said to the prison guard there, could I also bring counselling in, because I had gone into counselling. And so I was allowed to go into counselling there. So that was another step forward.
So tell us about this new direction in your life. Through Justice Department, you worked with marriage guidance.
Yes.
You worked with counselling.
Yes.
You worked with spiritual direction.
That came a little bit later, yes, but I did do spiritual direction.
So tell us about some of those.
I think one of the things that I learnt with counselling, we always started with single counselling. We didn't do couples immediately. And when I had my first couple, they seemed to understand what they needed to do. Now, in counselling, it shouldn't be you telling them what they should be doing. It should be you listening to them and them figuring out what they should be doing. And this couple seemed to have figured out what they needed to do next. And it was awesome. So we went to the counter as we finished and was asked, would you like to come back again? No, thank you. Bleh. I hadn't done anything. And the lady said, one of the ladies said later, Moira, always remember it's God working through you, not you doing the work. God will work with them. 6 months later, they asked to come back and continue that journey.
So ministry in New Zealand, ministry in Africa, ministry in Fiji, your role in marriage guidance and counselling and spiritual direction. The Salvation Army then invites Alan and Moira to be the Territorial Secretaries for Personnel responsible for offices in New Zealand. Particularly remember that time because Alan and you introduced Myers-Briggs personality. Why did you feel it was important for officers to understand those issues?
I can only speak for myself, and Alan would speak for himself. He used to speak, he understood that. And I think a lot of officers can speak for themselves on this one. We suddenly start to realise why we find it difficult to do some things. My personality has been an introvert. I find it very difficult, as you can see, I'm shaking like a leaf, to speak. So, but the Lord wanted me to speak. I did want to be Billy Graham at one point. Just imagine it. I'd never make it. But why was I so shy that I couldn't speak? And it made me realise that that was part of my personality. But my personality doesn't make me stay there. Right. My personality makes me go to the Lord to ask him to help me. Because he wants to be. Yeah. I'm in his hands at any rate. Yeah. So why can't I invite him in to help me with those things? So and we found when in sharing those experiences with others, when they discovered their personality types, that's what they could do also.
And then the move into retirement, and you came to work here at the Nest.
Yes.
Tell us about some of that work here at the Nest.
I first of all started off in counselling at the Nest and moved, and they asked me if I'd like to do the parenting program.
Right.
And I loved that. And my young lady over there with her baby turned up, and she's become a soldier.
Wonderful, yeah.
But many things like that happen. Many things like when you're working with people don't happen right too. And so we had failures, but we had successes. And we can turn them all to God. God is the one who works through us if we allow him to. If I remember somebody saying, if you don't feel God is with you, guess who moved?
Yeah, yeah.
And we can only work with him if we allow him to.
Moira, thank you. We honour you from Hamilton City Corps. You're one of ours. And Margaret and I particularly know the esteem that you were held in because we succeeded you in the role of Secretary for Personnel. Is there any final comment, Moira, that you'd like to make to the Corps family?
I don't know. Most of you have been called by the Lord to do something. And I thank you on behalf of the Salvation Army, on behalf of the Lord even, that you have obeyed. Don't disobey. Don't be a Jonah and run away. Jonah didn't succeed. Always remember God knows what's in your heart, what He's called you to do, what He's asked you to do, and obey. And I think we're going to sing my favourite song at the moment. In 1960, I think it was, some of you will remember Elsie Coxhead. Her husband was killed on the motorway. Well, he was in a coma for 6 weeks, but he did die. And at his funeral, we had the song, I'm in His Hands.
Yes.
Whatever the future holds, I'm in His hands. And I guess that has been part of my journey all along. But I've moved away. I'm not perfect. I've never been perfect. The Lord knows that one well and truly. But I've always been in His hands. Not obeying, but always been in His hands.
Well, we're going to bring the meeting soon to a close. And on this significant day in the Salvation Army calendar, this is a sacred and meaningful time for us as disciples, as an opportunity for all generations to pause and reflect on our journey with God. We take time to consider where we are in our relationship with Him, to remember the promises that we have made, and more importantly, to hold fast to the covenant God has made with us. Through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we are all invited to a life-transforming relationship with our Creator. May this season be one of renewal, a deeper connection, and bold as we live out the covenant we share with our loving God. So what is God saying to you today? What have you heard through the testimonies? How is God speaking to you about your covenant that you share together? Will you commit again to living this covenant out? What steps are you taking with God to action this? And maybe you're still considering what a covenant could mean for you or who Jesus is in your life. Maybe you became a Christian years ago and have chosen to honour God by living certain ways or doing certain things. Maybe your covenant with God is through soldiership or being an adherent. Maybe you're still trying to figure out who God is in your life and how you might live in response. Whatever your personal covenant with God is, He calls us all to step out in faith and partner with Him. He calls us to look to Him for His strength, for His peace, for courage, counsel, and guidance. And He calls us to look out to the world around us, to those we live with, work with, to those that we serve with, to interact with, in the physical world that we see, the hurt that we see, the needs in our community, the spaces and opportunities God is calling us into. Whose shoulders are you standing on today as you continue in this walk with God? Well, this morning, today, up the front here, also, we have some covenantal cards, renewal cards that are available. They're available to take as a reminder of this significant day, as a reminder that we can take on this journey as we look back, as we move forward. If you'd like to respond today, the invitation is there to make a commitment, and we do invite you to come forward. As a reminder today, maybe you want to make a commitment for the very first time today. This may be an amazing time for you on this covenantal day, on this renewal Sunday, this Founders' Day. If you'd like prayer, this is always an opportunity to come forward. And if you don't want to come forward, we'd also love to pray with you afterwards. But don't miss this opportunity in reflection and response before our final song today. So I'm going to do something. You've been sitting a while, so I'm going to invite you to stand, and we're just going to stand for a few moments, and when you feel ready, you can come forward, or you can just sit down when you want to. But I'll just invite you to stand now so we can stretch our legs before our final song. And we'll just play some response music now. And as I say, take this time to come forward and grab a covenantal card.